The Age of Exploration was one of the most transformative periods in human history. Spanning from the 15th to the 17th centuries, this era marked the expansion of European powers across the globe in search of new trade routes, wealth, and knowledge. Driven by technological advancements, economic ambitions, and a desire to spread religion and culture, European explorers ventured beyond their known world. It was during this time that Amerigo Vespucci emerged as a key figure, playing a crucial role in reshaping geographical understanding and ultimately giving his name to the newly discovered continent of America. Before the Age of Exploration, Europeans' knowledge of the world was largely confined to Europe, parts of Africa, and Asia. The Silk Road served as the primary trade route between Europe and the East, but it was fraught with dangers, including bandits, harsh climates, and geopolitical conflicts. The fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Empire in 1453 further restricted European access to Asia, prompting nations to seek alternative routes to the riches of the East. This necessity fueled exploration, with Portugal and Spain leading the way in maritime discoveries. Portugal, under the leadership of Prince Henry the Navigator, pioneered oceanic exploration by developing new navigational techniques and investing in long-distance voyages along the African coast. Bartolomé Dias' successful rounding of the Cape of Good Hope in 1488 and Vasco da Gama's historic voyage to India in 1498 proved that a sea route to Asia was possible. Spain, eager to compete with Portugal, sought a westward route to Asia, leading to Christopher Columbus's expedition in 1492. Though Columbus believed he had reached the outskirts of Asia, his discovery set the stage for further exploration of the Americas. The late 15th and early 16th centuries saw a fierce competition among European powers to claim new territories and establish trade networks. Spain and Portugal, in particular, sought to assert dominance over the newly found lands. The Treaty of Tordesillas, signed in 1494, divided the world into two zones of influence, granting Spain control over most of the Americas while Portugal secured territories in Africa, Asia, and Brazil. This agreement, while largely beneficial to both kingdoms, did not immediately clarify the true nature of the lands being explored. It was within this context that Amerigo Vespucci gained prominence. Unlike Columbus, who believed he had reached Asia, Vespucci provided a new interpretation of the lands encountered across the Atlantic. Through his voyages and detailed letters, he argued that the territories were not part of Asia, but an entirely separate continent. His observations and cartographic influence ultimately led to the recognition of the Americas as a distinct landmass, a realization that had profound consequences for European exploration and colonization. Vespucci's contributions were not merely those of a navigator, but also of a keen observer and communicator. His ability to describe the landscapes, people, and natural resources of the New World captivated European audiences. His letters, published widely across Europe, challenged existing geographical theories and contributed to a shift in how the world was perceived. Unlike Columbus, whose focus remained on proving his connection to Asia, Vespucci emphasized the uniqueness of the lands he explored, laying the foundation for a new world map. The naming of America in Vespucci's honor is a testament to his impact. The German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller, influenced by Vespucci's accounts, labeled the newly identified lands America in a 1507 world map. This decision, though controversial, reflected Vespucci's role in shaping European understanding of the Western Hemisphere. Over time, the name America became widely accepted, overshadowing Columbus's earlier claims. Despite his historical significance, Vespucci remains a somewhat enigmatic figure. Some scholars question the authenticity of his letters, while others debate the extent of his direct involvement in the voyages attributed to him. Nevertheless, his influence on geography and navigation is undeniable. His contributions not only helped define the physical boundaries of the world, but also influenced future explorations, leading to the eventual colonization of the Americas by European powers. The Age of Exploration was a period of both discovery and conquest, marked by encounters that reshaped global history. While explorers like Columbus, Magellan, and Cabot each played a role in unveiling the unknown, Vespucci's perspective helped redefine how the New World was understood. His legacy is not just in his voyages, but in the recognition of an entire continent that bears his name. As we delve deeper into Vespucci's life and achievements, it is crucial to understand the broader historical forces that shaped his journey. His story is not only one of personal ambition, but also of intellectual curiosity, scientific advancement, and the ever-evolving pursuit of knowledge. By examining his early life, voyages, and legacy, we gain insight into how one man's observations altered the course of history, cementing his place among the great explorers of the age of exploration. Amerigo Vespucci was born on March 9, 1454, in Florence, Italy, a city known for its flourishing culture, trade, and intellectual advancements during the Renaissance. Florence, under the influence of the powerful Medici family, was a hub of commerce and learning, making it an ideal environment for someone who would later contribute to global exploration. Vespucci grew up in a society that valued knowledge, scientific inquiry, and economic expansion, factors that would shape his later endeavors. Unlike many of the great explorers of his time, Vespucci was not initially destined for a maritime career. Instead, he was trained in business, mathematics, and the humanities, disciplines that would later serve him well as both a navigator and a chronicler of the New World. The Vespucci family was well established in Florentine society, with strong ties to banking and commerce. Amerigo's father, Nastasio Vespucci, was a notary, a prestigious position in Renaissance Italy, while his uncle, Giorgio Antonio Vespucci, was a Dominican friar and a scholar who influenced Amerigo's education. From an early age, Amerigo was exposed to classical texts, geography, and astronomy, which fueled his intellectual curiosity. His education at the hands of some of Florence's finest teachers provided him with knowledge that would later help him interpret and describe the lands he explored. One of the most important influences in Vespucci's life was the Medici family, particularly Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco de' Medici, a cousin of Lorenzo the Magnificent. The Medici were not only political rulers of Florence, but also patrons of the arts, science, and exploration. Amerigo found employment within the Medici banking system, handling financial transactions and managing trade interests. This position exposed him to the growing importance of overseas commerce and the expansion of European trade networks. It was likely through this connection that Vespucci first became interested in exploration, as the Medici were heavily invested in maritime enterprises. Vespucci's early career took him to Seville, Spain, in the late 1490s, where he worked for the Medici family's commercial interests. Seville was one of the most important ports in Spain, serving as a gateway for voyages to the New World. Here, he gained first-hand knowledge of navigation, shipbuilding, and the logistical challenges of transatlantic voyages. He also became acquainted with many explorers, merchants, and officials involved in Spain's ambitious exploration projects. It was during this time that Vespucci transitioned from a merchant to an active participant in Spain's overseas ventures. Unlike many explorers who were primarily sailors or military men, Vespucci's entry into the world of exploration was through commerce and logistics. His organizational skills and keen interest in geography made him a valuable asset to the Spanish crown. He was involved in provisioning ships for expeditions, which allowed him to study navigational techniques and the reports brought back by returning explorers. His growing expertise in cartography and navigation eventually led to his participation in voyages himself, setting him apart from other merchants of his time. Though Vespucci was not the first European to explore the Western Hemisphere, his ability to analyze and document his experiences was unique. His writings, which would later gain him international recognition, were deeply influenced by his background in business and scholarship. Unlike Columbus, who viewed his discoveries through the lens of faith and personal ambition, Vespucci approached exploration with a scientific and observational perspective. His meticulous descriptions of landscapes, indigenous cultures, and celestial navigation contributed significantly to European knowledge of the New World. Another significant aspect of Vespucci's early life was his exposure to maps and the evolving science of cartography. The Renaissance was a time of renewed interest in classical geography, and scholars were beginning to challenge traditional ideas about the shape and size of the world. Vespucci's familiarity with Ptolemaic maps and new navigational techniques gave him an advantage when interpreting the territories he explored. His ability to compare his observations with existing maps allowed him to recognize inconsistencies and question whether the lands reached by Columbus were indeed part of Asia. Vespucci's transition from a businessman to an explorer was not accidental, but rather a result of his intellectual curiosity and adaptability. While many of his contemporaries pursued exploration for wealth or religious conquest, Vespucci's primary contributions lay in his ability to communicate and analyze discoveries. His letters and maps would later play a key role in shaping the way Europeans understood the geography of the Americas, distinguishing him from the many explorers whose names have faded into obscurity. By the time he embarked on his first voyages, Vespucci had already acquired a wealth of knowledge that would make him one of the most significant figures of his time. His background in commerce allowed him to understand the economic implications of exploration, while his scientific and geographical knowledge helped him challenge prevailing misconceptions. Unlike Columbus, who died believing he had reached Asia, Vespucci was among the first to suggest that the newly discovered land were part of an entirely separate continent. Amerigo Vespucci's early life was marked by education, commerce, and an evolving interest in exploration. His connections to powerful figures, his exposure to navigation and trade, and his intellectual curiosity all played a role in shaping his future contributions. As he prepared to set sail on his first voyages, he carried with him not just the tools of a navigator, but the insights of a scholar. His ability to blend practical experience with theoretical knowledge would ultimately secure his place in history as the man who helped define the New World. Amerigo Vespucci's transition from a merchant and scholar to an explorer was not immediate, but was shaped by a series of events that placed him at the heart of Spain and Portugal's expanding maritime enterprises. While he was originally engaged in supplying ships and managing financial aspects of voyages, his growing fascination with exploration and navigation eventually led him to participate in transatlantic expeditions. Unlike Columbus, who actively sought sponsorship for his voyages, Vespucci's entry into the world of exploration was gradual, emerging from his role as a trusted merchant and organizer. By the late 1490s, Vespucci had established himself as a key figure in Seville's commercial and maritime circles. His work with the Medici family and his connections with influential figures in Spain allowed him to gain a deeper understanding of the logistical and navigational challenges associated with overseas exploration. It is believed that he played a role in preparing Columbus's later voyages, further solidifying his reputation as a knowledgeable figure in Spain's exploration efforts. However, Vespucci was not content with merely supporting these endeavors from shore. His intellectual curiosity and desire to see these new lands for himself pushed him toward direct involvement in expeditions. The exact details of Vespucci's first voyage remain debated among historians, primarily due to discrepancies in records and the authenticity of his letters. Some sources suggest that he first set sail in 1497 on a Spanish-backed expedition, while others argue that his first confirmed voyage took place in 1499. Regardless of the precise timeline, it is clear that by the end of the 15th century, Vespucci had embarked on transatlantic voyages that would shape his legacy as an explorer. One of the most significant factors in Vespucci's transition to exploration was his ability to apply scientific reasoning to navigation. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who relied on rudimentary maps and celestial observations, Vespucci had a deeper understanding of geography, astronomy, and cartography. This knowledge allowed him to document his findings in a way that was both methodical and persuasive, contributing to the growing European awareness of the lands beyond the Atlantic. Vespucci's voyages took him along the eastern coast of South America, where he encountered vast, unexplored territories that did not align with traditional descriptions of Asia. His observations of the stars, ocean currents, and coastal landscapes led him to question whether these lands were indeed part of the Asian continent, as Columbus had believed. Over time, his careful documentation and comparisons with existing geographical knowledge helped to build the case for the existence of a new world. Unlike Columbus, who was driven by the desire to reach the riches of Asia, Vespucci approached exploration with a more scientific and observational mindset. His letters and accounts, written with great detail, provided European scholars and mapmakers with valuable information about the climate, natural resources, and indigenous peoples of the lands he visited. These writings, widely circulated throughout Europe, played a crucial role in shaping public perception of the newly discovered territories. Another key aspect of Vespucci's early voyages was his involvement with both Spanish and Portuguese expeditions. While he initially sailed under the Spanish flag, he later participated in Portuguese-sponsored voyages as well. This dual involvement allowed him to gain a broader perspective on exploration and provided him with insights into the different strategies employed by the two leading maritime powers of the time. His service under King Manuel I of Portugal, in particular, exposed him to the extensive navigational knowledge that the Portuguese had developed through their explorations along the African coast. Vespucci's ability to navigate political and commercial networks was as important as his skills as an explorer. His reputation as a trusted, knowledgeable figure allowed him to secure positions of influence within Spain's exploration efforts. By the early 1500s, he had established himself not only as an experienced voyager, but also as an advisor to the Spanish crown, helping to shape future expeditions to the New World. One of the most enduring aspects of Vespucci's legacy was his role in defining the nature of the newly discovered lands. While Columbus remained convinced that he had reached the outskirts of Asia, Vespucci's observations led him to a different conclusion, one that would eventually change the way Europeans viewed the world. His argument that the lands across the Atlantic were not Asia, but an entirely separate continent, was a groundbreaking realization, one that would have profound implications for future exploration and colonization. Amerigo Vespucci's entry into the world of exploration was not marked by a singular moment of discovery, but rather by a steady accumulation of knowledge, experience, and insight. His transition from merchant to explorer was driven by his intellectual curiosity and his ability to analyze the world around him. While he may not have been the first European to reach the Americas, his contributions to the understanding of these lands were instrumental in shaping the course of history. As his voyages continued, Vespucci's role in defining the New World would become even more significant, ultimately securing his place in the annals of exploration. Amerigo Vespucci's voyages across the Atlantic marked a turning point in European exploration. While Christopher Columbus is often credited with the initial discovery of the Americas, it was Vespucci who played a crucial role in analyzing and defining these lands as a new continent. His journeys, which took place between 1497 and 1502, contributed significantly to the growing understanding of geography and helped reshape the European perception of the world. Through detailed observations of the environment, indigenous cultures, and celestial navigation, Vespucci challenged prevailing beliefs about the lands beyond the Atlantic Ocean. The details of Vespucci's first voyage remain disputed among historians due to inconsistencies in documentation. Some accounts suggest that he first set sail in 1497 under the Spanish flag, possibly reaching parts of Central America or the northern coast of South America. However, there is no concrete evidence to confirm this journey, and many scholars consider his 1499 expedition, undertaken with Spanish explorer Alonso de Ojeda, to be his first verified voyage. Regardless of the precise timeline, Vespucci's early expeditions provided him with crucial first-hand knowledge of the New World geography. During the 1499 voyage, Vespucci and Ojeda explored the coast of present-day Venezuela, a region named after the stilted houses built by indigenous people, which reminded the explorers of Venice. This journey was significant for Vespucci because it allowed him to conduct detailed observations of the land and its people. He recorded descriptions of the native populations, their customs, and the natural resources available, emphasizing the differences between these territories and those previously known to Europeans. These descriptions would later play a critical role in distinguishing the New World from Asia. One of the key aspects of Vespucci's voyages was his methodical approach to navigation and geography. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who relied primarily on estimation and experience, Vespucci applied scientific reasoning to his explorations. He used celestial navigation to determine latitude, making more precise calculations about the positions of the lands he encountered. His observations of ocean currents, coastal formations, and climate patterns also contributed to a better understanding of the Atlantic's geography. These efforts set him apart as not only an explorer, but also an early geographer. In 1501, Vespucci embarked on another expedition, this time under the Portuguese flag. Sponsored by King Manuel I of Portugal, this voyage was crucial in furthering his ideas about the existence of a separate continent. Vespucci and his crew traveled down the eastern coast of South America, reaching as far south as present-day Argentina. This journey provided additional evidence that the lands they were exploring were not part of Asia, as they extended far beyond what had previously been mapped. Vespucci's observations led him to a groundbreaking conclusion. The territories across the Atlantic were not merely extensions of Asia, but a completely new landmass. This realization challenged the conventional wisdom of the time, which was still largely influenced by the geographic ideas of Ptolemy and medieval cartographers. His detailed descriptions of the flora, fauna, and indigenous societies further reinforced the idea that these lands were distinct from those of the Old World. The significance of Vespucci's discoveries was not solely in the act of exploration itself, but in the way he communicated his findings. Unlike many explorers whose reports remained within the circles of royalty and navigators, Vespucci's letters were widely circulated throughout Europe. His accounts, written in a vivid and engaging style, captured the imagination of scholars and mapmakers. His ability to describe the New World in such detail made his reports highly influential, shaping European perspectives on the newly discovered territories. One of the most widely distributed of his writings was the letter known as Mundus Novus, New World, written in 1503. In this letter, Vespucci explicitly stated that the lands he had explored were part of a previously unknown continent. The letter gained immense popularity and was translated into multiple languages, further spreading the idea that a new world had been discovered. His detailed accounts contributed to the growing realization that the Americas were separate from Asia, an idea that would eventually be confirmed by later explorers such as Ferdinand Magellan. Despite the significance of his findings, Vespucci's voyages did not lead to the immediate recognition of the Americas as a distinct continent. Many European explorers and rulers were still hesitant to abandon the belief that these lands were connected to Asia. However, over time, Vespucci's arguments gained traction, particularly among cartographers and scholars who sought to revise existing maps based on new discoveries. His contributions to navigation and cartography laid the foundation for the eventual recognition of the Americas as a separate landmass. Vespucci's early voyages were instrumental in shaping European knowledge of the Western Hemisphere. Unlike Columbus, who remained convinced that he had reached the fringes of Asia, Vespucci approached exploration with a more scientific mindset, using observation and reasoning to reach his conclusions. His ability to document and communicate his findings made him one of the most influential figures of the age of exploration. As his discoveries gained recognition, his name would become forever linked to the land he helped define, a testament to his role in reshaping the world map. One of the most enduring aspects of Amerigo Vespucci's legacy is the naming of the American continents. Unlike Christopher Columbus, who is often credited with discovering the New World but never fully understood the scope of his findings, Vespucci played a crucial role in redefining how Europeans perceived the lands across the Atlantic. His observations, writings, and maps provided compelling evidence that the territories being explored were not part of Asia, but an entirely separate landmass. This realization ultimately led to the continents being named after him, a distinction that set Vespucci apart from many of his contemporaries. The process of naming the newly discovered lands was not immediate, nor was it solely the result of Vespucci's own actions. Instead, it was the work of European scholars and cartographers who, influenced by Vespucci's writings, recognized the need to distinguish these lands from Asia. One of the key figures in this process was Martin Waldseemüller, a German cartographer who, in 1507, published a world map that labeled the southern part of the New World as America in honor of Vespucci. Waldseemüller's decision to name the continent after Vespucci was based on the explorer's widely circulated letters, particularly Mundus Novus, New World, and Lettera di Amerigo Vespucci del Isole Nuovamente Trovate in Quattro Suoi Viaggi, Letter of Amerigo Vespucci concerning the islands newly discovered on his 4 voyages. These texts had convinced many scholars that Vespucci, not Columbus, had correctly identified the new lands as a separate continent. In his Cosmography Introductio, the book accompanying his map, Waldseemüller wrote that since Vespucci had discovered the new lands, they should be named in his honor. At the time, it was common for new territories to be named after their discoverers, particularly when they were the ones who provided the first accurate descriptions. Although Columbus had reached the Caribbean years before Vespucci's expeditions, his insistence that he had found a new route to Asia led to confusion about the true nature of his discoveries. Vespucci's scientific approach, combined with his engaging descriptions of the lands and their inhabitants, made a strong impression on scholars seeking to update European maps. Waldseemüller's map was revolutionary for its time, as it was one of the first to depict the New World as separate from Asia. His choice of the name America for the newly recognized landmass was initially intended to refer to what is now South America. However, as European exploration continued and more maps were produced, the name gradually expanded to include North America as well. This process occurred over several decades, solidifying Vespucci's place in history as the namesake of an entire hemisphere. Despite the honor of having the continents named after him, Vespucci himself was likely unaware of the full impact of Waldseemüller's decision. By the time Cosmography Introductio was published, Vespucci was working as the chief navigator for Spain, overseeing maritime operations and training new explorers. There is no historical record of him reacting to the naming of America, suggesting that he may not have known about it during his lifetime. The significance of the name became more widely recognized only in the following decades as maps and geographical knowledge continued to evolve. It is important to note that the naming of America was not without controversy. Some historians and explorers, particularly supporters of Columbus, felt that naming the continent after Vespucci was unjust. They argued that Columbus, as the first European to reach the New World, should have been honored instead. However, Columbus's failure to recognize the true nature of his discoveries, combined with Vespucci's influential writings, ultimately led to Vespucci receiving this distinction. Over time, Columbus's contributions remained highly regarded, but the name America persisted, cementing Vespucci's legacy. Another reason for Vespucci's lasting impact in geography was his contributions to the development of navigational techniques and cartography. His observations about ocean currents, celestial navigation, and the geography of the Southern Hemisphere helped improve European understanding of global navigation. His letters provided valuable information about the climate, terrain, and natural resources of the lands he explored, influencing subsequent explorers and mapmakers. While Vespucci's role in exploration was significant, it is essential to recognize that he was not the sole contributor to the changing perception of the New World. Other explorers, including Ferdinand Magellan and Vasco Núñez de Balboa, further confirmed that the lands across the Atlantic were not part of Asia. However, Vespucci's ability to communicate his findings effectively set him apart, allowing his ideas to shape the way the world was mapped and understood. The naming of America remains one of the most fascinating chapters in the history of exploration. While Vespucci did not set out to have his name immortalized on the world map, his contributions to geography, cartography, and scientific exploration ensured that his legacy would endure. Today, the continents of North and South America serve as a testament to his role in shaping European knowledge of the Western Hemisphere, securing his place in history alongside the greatest explorers of the Age of Discovery. After his groundbreaking voyages and the widespread circulation of his writings, Amerigo Vespucci transitioned from an active explorer to a prominent figure in Spain's maritime administration. By the early 1500s, Spain had recognized his expertise in navigation, cartography, and exploration, appointing him to a crucial role that would shape the future of Spanish expansion. As Piloto Mayor, chief navigator of Spain, Vespucci played a vital part in training new explorers, refining navigation techniques, and contributing to Spain's ambitions of establishing dominance in the New World. The appointment of Vespucci as Piloto Mayor in 1508 under King Ferdinand II of Aragon was a testament to his extensive knowledge of transatlantic voyages. At the time, Spain was intensifying its exploration efforts, seeking to solidify its claims in the Americas and find efficient routes for trade and conquest. Given the increasing number of expeditions departing from Spain, there was a pressing need for standardization in navigation, as well as accurate training for pilots and captains. Vespucci's reputation as a skilled observer and map-maker made him the ideal candidate for this responsibility. One of Vespucci's most important duties as chief navigator was the development of improved navigation charts and maps. The Spanish crown needed precise geographical information to support its claims in the Americas and facilitate safe voyages across the Atlantic. Vespucci, drawing from his own experience and the accounts of other explorers, worked on refining existing maps and introducing more reliable methods for determining latitude and longitude. His efforts helped reduce navigational errors and improve the success rate of Spanish expeditions. Another significant aspect of Vespucci's work in this role was the establishment of a formal training system for Spanish navigators. Prior to this, many pilots and captains relied on traditional seafaring knowledge passed down through experience, often lacking scientific rigor. Vespucci sought to change this by introducing systematic training in celestial navigation, the use of navigational instruments, and the interpretation of maritime charts. This initiative strengthened Spain's naval capabilities, ensuring that future explorers were better prepared for the challenges of oceanic travel. Vespucci also played a role in verifying and approving navigators who sought licenses to sail under the Spanish flag. As Piloto Mayor, he was responsible for testing the competency of pilots and ensuring that only those with adequate knowledge and skills were allowed to command ships on overseas voyages. This process was crucial in maintaining Spain's maritime superiority and preventing costly failures in exploration and colonization efforts. His influence extended to shaping Spain's maritime policies, as he advised the Crown on matters related to exploration, territorial claims, and trade routes. Despite his administrative role, Vespucci remained deeply engaged in the scientific aspects of navigation. He continued to correspond with scholars and cartographers, exchanging ideas about the newly discovered lands and the evolving understanding of world geography. His insights contributed to the refinement of European maps, particularly in recognizing the Americas as a distinct landmass separate from Asia. This intellectual collaboration further cemented Vespucci's legacy as a key figure in the Age of Discovery. However, Vespucci's transition from explorer to administrator was not without its challenges. Spain's exploration efforts were highly competitive, with various factions vying for influence and control over maritime ventures. The rivalry between supporters of Columbus and those who aligned with Vespucci's interpretations of the New World created tensions within Spain's naval circles. Despite this, Vespucci managed to maintain his position and continued to influence Spanish exploration policy until his death. His role as Piloto Mayor also reflected the shifting priorities of European exploration. By the early 16th century, the initial phase of discovery was giving way to more structured efforts in colonization, governance, and economic exploitation of the New World. While earlier explorers, including Vespucci himself, had been primarily concerned with charting unknown lands, Spain was now focusing on establishing permanent settlements, exploiting natural resources, and expanding its imperial reach. Vespucci's work in standardizing navigation was a crucial step in enabling this transformation. Vespucci's final years were spent in Seville, where he continued his work as chief navigator until his death in 1512. Though he did not return to the seas, his contributions to Spain's exploration efforts remained significant. His influence extended beyond his lifetime, as the navigational techniques and cartographic advancements he introduced continued to shape Spanish maritime operations for decades to come. Amerigo Vespucci's tenure as Piloto Mayor marked the culmination of his lifelong dedication to exploration and geography. While he may be best remembered for his voyages and the naming of America, his work as Spain's chief navigator was equally important in shaping the course of history. Through his efforts in training navigators, improving maps, and refining navigational techniques, he ensured that future generations of explorers could continue expanding the boundaries of the known world. His legacy as both an explorer and a scientist remains a defining aspect of the Age of Discovery. Amerigo Vespucci's legacy as an explorer and navigator is one of great historical significance, yet it has also been the subject of considerable controversy. While his contributions to the understanding of the New World were undeniable, questions have persisted regarding the authenticity of his accounts, the extent of his discoveries, and whether he truly deserved to have the American continents named after him. The debate surrounding Vespucci's achievements highlights the complexities of historical interpretation and the competition among explorers during the Age of Discovery. One of the primary sources of controversy regarding Vespucci's legacy is the accuracy of his published letters, particularly Mundus Novus and Lettera di Amerigo Vespucci del Isole Novemini Trovate and Quattro Suoi Viaggi. These accounts, which described his voyages and discoveries, were widely circulated and played a crucial role in shaping Europe's perception of the New World. However, historians have long debated whether all of the information contained in these letters was entirely factual, or if certain details were exaggerated, misrepresented, or even fabricated to enhance Vespucci's reputation. A major point of contention is the disputed 1497 voyage, in which Vespucci allegedly reached the mainland of the Americas before any other European, including Columbus. Some historians argue that there is little concrete evidence to support this claim and suggest that this voyage may have been invented or mistakenly attributed to him. If Vespucci had indeed reached the New World in 1497, it would mean that he was the first European to set foot on the American mainland, a distinction that would challenge Columbus's legacy. However, due to the lack of reliable documentation, many scholars remain skeptical of this claim. Another criticism leveled against Vespucci is the perception that he actively sought to diminish Columbus's achievements in favor of his own. Some of his contemporaries accused him of trying to overshadow Columbus, particularly after his letters became widely popular in Europe. However, there is no direct evidence to suggest that Vespucci personally sought to discredit Columbus or that he played any role in the decision to name the continent after himself. The naming of America was largely the work of Martin Waldseemüller and other cartographers, who were influenced by Vespucci's writings and the clear distinction he made between the New World and Asia. The rivalry between Columbus and Vespucci's supporters further fueled the debate over his legacy. While Columbus's voyages were instrumental in initiating European contact with the Americas, his insistence that he had reached Asia limited his ability to recognize the true nature of his discoveries. Vespucci, on the other hand, was among the first to argue that the lands across the Atlantic were not connected to Asia, but rather part of a distinct landmass. This realization was critical in shaping Europe's understanding of a new world, even if Columbus's supporters viewed it as an attempt to downplay their leader's achievements. In addition to the questions surrounding his discoveries, some historians have questioned whether Vespucci was truly an explorer in the same sense as Columbus, Magellan, or other great navigators. Unlike these figures, Vespucci did not command his own expeditions, nor did he set out with the primary intention of claiming new lands for Spain or Portugal. Instead, he served as an observer, navigator, and chronicler, accompanying other expeditions and providing valuable scientific insights. While his role was undeniably important, some argue that he should be regarded more as a geographer than a pioneer of exploration. Despite these controversies, Vespucci's contributions to the field of navigation and cartography cannot be overlooked. His observations on ocean currents, celestial navigation, and the geography of the southern hemisphere significantly improved European understanding of the world. His letters, whether exaggerated or not, provided Europe with a more detailed view of the lands, cultures, and peoples of the Americas. Regardless of whether he was the first to reach the mainland, his ability to communicate his findings effectively shaped the way future explorers approach their missions. Moreover, Vespucci's legacy should be viewed in the broader context of the Age of Discovery, a period marked by intense competition, conflicting accounts, and the rewriting of history to suit political and nationalistic interests. Many explorers, including Columbus himself, exaggerated or misrepresented aspects of their journeys to secure financial backing and royal favor. In this context, Vespucci's embellishments, if they indeed occurred, were not unusual, nor did they necessarily diminish the importance of his contributions. Ultimately, the controversy surrounding Vespucci's legacy serves as a reminder that history is often shaped by interpretation and perspective. While some critics argue that he was unfairly credited with discoveries he did not make, others emphasize his role in recognizing and defining the New World. His name, immortalized on 2 continents, remains a testament to the impact of his work, regardless of the debates that surround it. In the centuries that followed his death, Vespucci's reputation fluctuated, with some scholars dismissing him as a mere opportunist and others recognizing him as a key figure in geographical history. Today, modern historians continue to analyze his writings and his voyages, seeking to separate fact from myth. Regardless of the ongoing debates, one thing remains clear. Amerigo Vespucci played an essential role in shaping Europe's understanding of the Americas, and his name endures as a symbol of one of the most transformative periods in human history. Amerigo Vespucci was not only an explorer, but also a keen observer and scientific thinker whose contributions extended beyond his voyages. His work significantly influenced the fields of navigation, geography, and cartography, helping Europe refine its understanding of the world. While other explorers focused on territorial conquests and trade, Vespucci's approach was more analytical, seeking to comprehend the natural and astronomical factors that governed exploration. His insights contributed to a new era of scientific discovery, paving the way for future advancements in global navigation and mapmaking. One of Vespucci's most valuable contributions was his method of determining longitude using the conjunctions of planets and the moon. During the late 15th and early 16th centuries, navigation across open seas remained a challenge due to the lack of precise methods for determining a ship's east-west position. Vespucci attempted to address this problem by using celestial observations, particularly the positions of Jupiter and the Moon. Although his method was not entirely accurate by modern standards, it represented an important step in the development of longitude measurement. In addition to his work on longitude, Vespucci's observations of the southern hemisphere provided European scholars with new information about the stars and constellations visible from regions far from Europe. His voyages took him to latitudes that few Europeans had previously explored, allowing him to document the positions of unfamiliar stars and identify key navigational markers. His records were among the first to describe the Southern Cross constellation, which later became an essential guide for sailors navigating the southern oceans. Another major contribution Vespucci made to geography was his recognition that the land masses he explored were part of a separate continent rather than Asia. Unlike Christopher Columbus, who firmly believed he had reached the outskirts of the Asian continent, Vespucci was one of the first Europeans to propose that the lands across the Atlantic were an entirely new world. His writings describe the geography, climate, and natural features of the New World in great detail, helping cartographers construct more accurate representations of the globe. Vespucci's insistence that the New World was not part of Asia had a profound impact on European cartography. His accounts influenced influential mapmakers such as Martin Waldseemüller, who created the first maps that depicted the Americas as distinct from the Old World. This shift in perception altered European exploration strategies, prompting more expeditions aimed at understanding the full extent of the newfound continents rather than seeking shortcuts to Asia. Beyond his impact on mapmaking, Vespucci's observations about the indigenous peoples of the New World were among the most detailed of his time. Unlike some explorers who viewed native populations purely through the lens of conquest and subjugation, Vespucci provided ethnographic descriptions that highlighted cultural differences, social structures, and economic practices. His letters described the customs, diets, and beliefs of the people he encountered, contributing to Europe's early understanding of the diverse civilizations inhabiting the Americas. Additionally, Vespucci's meticulous documentation of ocean currents played a crucial role in shaping maritime exploration. He was one of the first European navigators to study and describe the equatorial currents of the Atlantic Ocean, particularly the South Equatorial Current and the Brazil Current. His understanding of these oceanic patterns helped later explorers optimize their routes, reducing travel times and improving the efficiency of transatlantic voyages. This knowledge was instrumental in establishing reliable shipping routes between Europe and the Americas. Vespucci's scientific approach to exploration distinguished him from many of his contemporaries. While figures like Columbus and Magellan are often remembered for their daring voyages and political ambitions, Vespucci was more focused on the empirical study of the lands and seas he encountered. His emphasis on observation, measurement, and recording data reflected the early principles of the scientific method, influencing the way future explorers conducted their own expeditions. His influence extended beyond his lifetime, as the advancements he introduced in navigation and geography continued to shape European exploration. The standardized training for navigators that he helped establish as Piloto Mayor of Spain ensured that future generations of sailors were better equipped to handle the challenges of long-distance maritime travel. His emphasis on celestial navigation became a fundamental aspect of European seafaring, allowing navigators to traverse vast distances with greater accuracy. Vespucci's contributions to science and geography were pivotal in transforming European knowledge of the world. His work in celestial navigation, oceanography, cartography, and ethnography helped redefine the way explorers approach their missions. While his name is often associated with the naming of America, his true legacy lies in his ability to blend exploration with scientific inquiry, laying the groundwork for the great discoveries that followed. Through his meticulous observations and pioneering spirit, Vespucci left an indelible mark on the history of human exploration and our understanding of the world. One of the most enduring aspects of Amerigo Vespucci's legacy is the naming of the American continents after him. Unlike many explorers who ventured into uncharted lands, Vespucci did not establish colonies, claim vast territories, or lead conquests. However, his name became permanently associated with the New World, a fact that has sparked debate among historians for centuries. The process by which the continents came to bear his name was not an intentional act on his part, but rather a consequence of the way his discoveries were interpreted and disseminated throughout Europe. The naming of America can be traced back to the influential German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller, who, in 1507, produced a groundbreaking world map titled Universalis Cosmographia. This map was one of the first to depict the newly discovered lands across the Atlantic as separate from Asia, and it labeled them America in honor of Vespucci. The reasoning behind this decision was explicitly stated in an accompanying text, Cosmographie Introductio, which praised Vespucci for recognizing that the lands were a distinct continent and not a part of the Asian continent, as Columbus had believed. Waldseemüller and his colleagues at the Gymnasium Vosges in Saint-Dié, France, based their decision largely on Vespucci's Mundus Novus and other widely circulated letters. These writings had a profound impact on European geographical thought, particularly in their assertion that the lands Vespucci explored were part of an entirely new world, separate from the previously known continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa. This realization fundamentally altered how Europeans conceptualized global geography, and Vespucci's role in this revelation was deemed significant enough to merit the honor of having the continent named after him. It is important to note that the name America was initially applied only to what is now South America. Waldseemüller's map depicted the lands Vespucci had explored, primarily along the eastern coast of South America, and he suggested that this region be named after the explorer in the same way that Europe was named after the mythological figure Europa. Over time, as more of the New World became known, the name America was gradually extended to include North America as well, further solidifying Vespucci's association with the entire hemisphere. Despite the early adoption of the name America, there was no immediate consensus on its use. In Spain and Portugal, for example, many continued to refer to the newly discovered lands simply as the New World, Nuevo Mundo. Furthermore, Columbus's supporters, particularly in Spain, resisted efforts to attribute the discovery of the Americas to Vespucci, maintaining that Columbus was the rightful discoverer. However, as time passed, the name America became increasingly accepted in academic and cartographic circles, particularly in Northern and Central Europe, where Waldseemüller's work was influential. Ironically, Waldseemüller himself later seemed to reconsider his decision. In later editions of his maps, he omitted the name America, possibly in response to criticisms that Columbus, not Vespucci, was the true discoverer of the New World. However, by this point, the name had already gained widespread use, and it proved impossible to reverse. Other cartographers continued to use it, ensuring its permanence in global geography. By the mid-16th century, the term America was firmly established in common usage across Europe, appearing in maps, scholarly works, and legal documents. It is important to acknowledge that Vespucci himself never sought this recognition. Unlike Columbus, who lobbied for titles, land grants, and financial reward from the Spanish monarchy, Vespucci did not campaign to have his name immortalized in history. His writings, though widely read, were not intended as self-promotion, but rather as scientific reports on his observations. There is no evidence that he ever claimed to have discovered the New World before Columbus or that he intended to diminish Columbus's accomplishments. Instead, his primary goal was to document and analyze the lands he had visited, helping Europe better understand the vast territories across the Atlantic. The naming of America after Vespucci is ultimately a reflection of the way history is shaped not just by individual actions, but by the interpretations and decisions of those who record it. Waldseemüller and his colleagues, relying on the best information available at the time, chose to credit Vespucci for recognizing the New World as a separate continent. Whether or not Vespucci deserved this honor over Columbus or other explorers is a matter of historical debate, but the reality is that once a name takes hold in the cartographic and scholarly traditions, it is difficult to change. Over the centuries, the name America has come to symbolize an entire hemisphere and the many nations that inhabit it. While Vespucci's own role in exploration was relatively modest compared to some of his contemporaries, his name has become one of the most recognizable in history. His contributions to navigation, cartography, and the conceptualization of the New World remain significant, even as debates over his legacy continue. The naming of America after Amerigo Vespucci is an example of how historical narratives evolve and how individuals can achieve lasting recognition in unexpected ways. Vespucci's letters, maps, and scientific observations shaped how Europeans viewed the world, and his identification of the New World as a separate continent was a major milestone in geographic history. Whether by accident or by merit, his name endures as an integral part of global identity, immortalized in the very lands he helped define. The legacy of Amerigo Vespucci, one of the most consequential figures of the Age of Discovery, is often overshadowed by the dramatic exploits of other explorers like Christopher Columbus and Ferdinand Magellan. However, Vespucci's unique contributions to navigation, cartography, and the conceptualization of the Americas ensure that his influence on global history is profound and lasting. His name, now synonymous with the continents of North and South America, continues to evoke questions about the nature of exploration, the complexities of historical recognition, and the intersections between science and geopolitics. Vespucci's legacy is rooted in his ability to combine scientific rigor with exploration. While his contemporaries were preoccupied with territorial conquest and expanding empires, Vespucci's focus was on understanding the natural world. His work in celestial navigation, astronomy, and geography offered Europe new tools to comprehend the vast distances between continents and to navigate the oceans more safely and effectively. In this sense, Vespucci was a pioneer not just in exploration, but also in the application of scientific principles to the practical challenges of the sea. One of the most notable aspects of Vespucci's work was his insistence on recognizing the Americas as distinct from Asia. While Columbus, despite his voyages, remained convinced that he had reached the outskirts of Asia, Vespucci's observations led him to conclude that the lands he explored were part of a separate, uncharted continent. This realization fundamentally altered Europe's understanding of geography and paved the way for future exploration. Vespucci's assertions helped European scholars and cartographers map the New World in ways that better reflected its true geography, contributing to the intellectual and practical shift toward viewing the Americas as an independent entity. The naming of the Americas after Vespucci is arguably the most enduring aspect of his legacy. Though the decision to name the continents after him was not his own, it was a recognition of his intellectual contributions to the understanding of the New World. Martin Waltzmüller's 1507 map, which first applied the name America to South America and later to the entire Western Hemisphere, marked a turning point in the history of geography. This act of naming, driven by Vespucci's writings, was a significant milestone in the process by which the New World came to be seen as a distinct geographical entity. The name America eventually became a universal marker of the continents, cementing Vespucci's place in the history of exploration. Vespucci's role as a cartographer and his contributions to map-making were not limited to the 1507 map. His observations, particularly of the Southern Hemisphere, helped shape subsequent European maps of the world. His accounts provided critical insights into the geography of the Americas, especially in regions that were not well known to Europeans at the time. His work with ocean currents, celestial navigation, and the mapping of new coastlines created a foundation upon which future explorers and cartographers could build. Without Vespucci's detailed observations and meticulous recording of his voyages, the development of accurate maps and charts would have been significantly delayed. Despite his significant contributions to geographical science, Vespucci's legacy has often been marred by controversy. Historians continue to debate the veracity of his accounts, questioning the accuracy of his voyages and whether he exaggerated or even invented certain aspects of his travels. The question of whether Vespucci truly deserved the honor of having the continents named after him has been the subject of much discussion. Yet, these controversies do not diminish the importance of his role in the Age of Discovery. Vespucci was part of a broader intellectual and cultural movement that sought to make sense of the unknown world, and his contributions were instrumental in transforming Europe's understanding of global geography. Beyond the debates about his achievements, Vespucci's legacy must be understood in the context of the broader historical and political forces at play during the Age of Discovery. His work coincided with a period of intense competition among European powers for control over new territories, trade routes, and resources. In this environment, the quest for recognition, both personal and national, was deeply tied to the success of exploration. Vespucci's intellectual contributions, while critical, were often framed within the larger narrative of European imperial expansion, and his legacy became intertwined with the political dynamics of the time. The fact that Vespucci's name continues to be synonymous with the Americas is a reflection not just of his personal achievements, but also of the way in which history is constructed. Names, places, and events are often shaped by the forces of time, politics, and memory. In the case of Vespucci, his name endured not only because of his contributions to exploration, but also because of the decisions made by cartographers and scholars who recognized his intellectual influence. The naming of America was a decision that would have far-reaching consequences, influencing not only how the Americas were perceived, but also how European powers understood their relationship to the New World. Vespucci's legacy also raises important questions about the nature of discovery and the ways in which historical figures are remembered. The naming of America, while a fitting tribute to Vespucci's work, also underscores the complex interplay between exploration, colonialism, and cultural memory. The story of the Americas is not just a story of geographical discovery, but also a story of the human desire to name, claim, and dominate new territories. As such, Vespucci's legacy is both a testament to the intellectual achievements of the Age of Discovery and a reminder of the ways in which history is often shaped by the dominant narratives of the time. In conclusion, Amerigo Vespucci's legacy is one that transcends the controversies surrounding his voyages and the naming of the Americas. His contributions to navigation, cartography, and geography had a profound and lasting impact on European exploration and the scientific understanding of the world. Whether through his groundbreaking work in celestial navigation, his assertion that the New World was a separate continent, or his role in the development of more accurate maps, Vespucci's influence remains felt to this day. His name, now synonymous with the American continents, serves as a reminder of the ways in which intellectual exploration can shape the course of history, even when the individual behind it is subject to the vicissitudes of time and historical interpretation.